She heard a crack in the dark, followed the rain, and found a bloodied stranger by the riverbank, holding a medallion no one in Bozeman dares to explain. He doesn't remember his own name, but he carries a past powerful enough to bring down wealthy men by silence and set an entire town on fire. Today, you'll witness how a single act of compassion turns into war. Police on someone's payroll, threats at the door, hidden tapes, a buried safe, and a courtroom that could flip everything upside down. Stay until the very end, because when the truth breaks through mud and fear, what once looked like a love story turns into justice. And the kiss that silences the town square will reveal the true heir. But before the light arrives, someone wants him gone. Again. Are you ready to discover why this medallion is worth blood, land, and an entire stolen life? Clara, a widow who swore never to love again, must choose between saving a stranger and preserving the fragile peace. When that safe opens, there will be dates, voices, and a name they tried to erase. Harris. Take a deep breath. A storm changed everything. Those heavy clouds didn't just bring rain. They carried a fate Clara Jenkins could never have imagined. At 42 years old, a widow and owner of a modest farm on the outskirts of Bozeman, Montana, she was no stranger to silence. But that night, silence was broken. A sound coming from the river, a sharp crack in the dark, something out of place. And before we dive into this story full of twists, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll always get powerful and inspiring stories like this one. And tell me, from which city are you watching this video? I'd love to know how far this story will travel. Clara threw on her denim jacket, laced up her boots, grabbed a flashlight, and headed down the trail that led to the river. The rain intensified, the wind howled, and lightning split the sky, briefly lighting up the muddy road. Her steps halted at a sight that froze her blood. There was something or someone lying at the edge of the bank. She ran closer and saw a young man, unconscious, covered in mud, blood trickling from his forehead. He was breathing, but wounded. Around his neck, a silver medallion hung, engraved with the initials, LH. She looked around, no vehicle, no footprints besides her own. Just that young, soaked, and vulnerable body. With effort, she dragged him to her old 1984 blue Chevrolet pickup, threw a tarp on the back seat, and settled him there. She sped down the winding road, windshield wipers battling the heavy rain. The AM radio crackled news about the storm, while her heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know who he was, but something told her that taking him home was more than a kind act. It was the beginning of something impossible to predict. When she arrived, Clara rushed to open the front door, turned on the living room light, and pulled the young man to the couch, leaving a trail of water and dirt on the floor. She grabbed towels, compresses, alcohol, and started cleaning his wounds. The cut on his forehead was deep, freshly opened. He was pale, almost colorless. Handsome features despite the injuries, strong jawline, chapped lips, and closed eyes that seemed to be dreaming of something dark. When she removed the medallion to clean his neck, something stirred inside her. "Who are you?" she whispered, as if he could hear. She couldn't sleep that night. Wrapped in a thin blanket, she sat in the armchair, watching the stranger sleep. On the couch. With every breath he took, something inside her shifted. He looked lost, hurt, but there was something in his face. Something familiar, maybe. She picked up the landline and dialed the police station, but the storm had knocked out the lines. No communication, no help, no answers. Just her, a stranger, and a house filled with silence, broken only by the rain tapping on the windows. That's when she heard it. A whisper, weak, broken. "Help." Clara rushed to the couch. The young man opened his eyes for a second. Green, intense, frightened. "You're safe," she said, holding his cold hand. "You're in my home. You're going to be all right." He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Who Am I? Clara's throat tightened. I don't know, but you'll find out. He passed out again, and she stayed there, holding his hand, feeling the weight of the unknown settle on her shoulders like a storm within her soul. That night, Clara realized her loneliness was over, but maybe so was her peace. The next morning, Clara made hot soup, and when he woke again, more alert, she helped him sip it slowly. Do you remember anything? She asked, and he simply shook his head. Not even your name? Nothing, he replied. His voice was hoarse, like it had come from a nightmare that lasted too long. You have this medallion, she said, holding up the necklace. LH, can I call you Luke? He looked at her for a moment that felt eternal. Then he whispered, Luke sounds good. She smiled, and inside, something in her broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. That afternoon, she helped him bathe and change clothes, gently and respectfully. He still limped, still felt pain, but insisted on walking out to the porch to breathe the cold mountain air. Sitting in a wooden chair, watching the horizon, Luke closed his eyes and said, There's something here I recognize, but I don't know what. Clara sat beside him. You've got time, and I've got patience. He turned to her. Why are you helping me? She answered with a sigh. Because maybe you showed up when I needed saving too. By nightfall, she made a simple dinner. Roast beef, potatoes, and cornbread. Luke ate slowly, but with appetite. Later, they sat in the living room, the old TV tuned to a local news channel. The broadcast talked about last night's storm, but nothing about disappearances. No alerts, nothing that could explain who he was. Clara watched him, trying to imagine his life before the river, but it was hard to picture anything except the now. His presence filled the house in a way neither time nor silence ever had. That night, before going to bed, Clara left a folded blanket on the couch and turned off the living room light. But before climbing the stairs, she heard his voice, soft. Clara. She stopped, turned around. Thank you for everything. She smiled, eyes brimming with tears. Good night, Luke. She climbed the stairs with her heart racing. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside that house, the hurricane was just beginning. The following days passed like a fog. Clara did her best to maintain the farm's routine, but now everything revolved around Luke. He was recovering quickly, though his head still throbbed at the slightest effort. The scar on his forehead was beginning to heal, but the questions inside him remained open like wounds. From time to time, he'd freeze, staring blankly into space. Any memories? She'd ask, and he would just shake his head, frustrated. But at night, things were different. Luke didn't sleep peacefully. His dreams were torment in the form of sound and image. On the second night, Clara woke up to screams coming from the living room. She ran downstairs and found Luke sitting on the couch, gasping, his body drenched in sweat. Easy, you're safe, she said, holding his face in her hands. He blinked rapidly, trying to get his bearings. I heard gunshots. I saw a woman crying and someone calling me. Then everything went dark. Clara sat beside him and embraced him, trying to calm his shaking body. It was just a nightmare, but inside her, doubt grew. That wasn't just a dream. It was memory. Memory mixed with fear. At breakfast, Luke barely spoke. Leaning against the counter, he held his cup with trembling hands. I feel like I was part of something bad, he said. Clara watched him in silence. Those words echoed in her more than she wanted to admit. But one thing was clear. He wasn't a violent man. On the contrary, he was gentle, observant, and there was a quiet sweetness in his eyes that unsettled her. Even so, she couldn't ignore the signs. Maybe what you saw isn't what it seems, she replied. Sometimes memory is tricky. But even she didn't fully believe that Dot in the nearby village. Rumors began to spread. Bozeman was a small town and news traveled like wildfire. At the local market, Clara felt the stares. In line at the gas station, she heard whispers. Who's the man living with the Jenkins widow? They say he showed up wounded. On the run. The next day, while stopping to buy flour, the shopkeeper was blunt. You okay, Mom? I heard you've got someone at your house. Clara took a deep breath. He's just a wounded young man. No memory, I'm helping him. But his eyes said it all. The town had already judged Clara returned home with a tight chest. When she arrived, she saw Luke sitting on the porch, feet resting on the step, eyes lost on the horizon. You okay? He asked, noticing her face. She nodded and sat beside him. People are talking. Luke was silent for a few seconds. About me? About us, she corrected. He looked at her with those intense green eyes. You can send me away. I don't want to cause you trouble. She gave a crooked smile. You already did, but not the kind that makes me want. You gone. That evening, Clara took him to the barn. She wanted to distract him, show him the simple things around the farm. He helped replace the tarp on the roof, even though he was still in pain. When he slipped, she rushed to grab his arm. Their eyes met once again. No words, just a thick silence, heavy with the unsaid. You look at me like you know me, he whispered. And you make me feel like I have a place in this world, she replied. He said nothing, just stood there, looking at her as if trying to remember, or simply feel. That night, while Clara wrote in the farm's notebook, Luke watched her from the kitchen doorway. She noticed and smiled. Need something? I want to know who I was before the river. She stood up and walked toward him. Maybe what matters now is who you are here, with me. He gently touched the side of her face, and for a moment, their faces drew close. Clara's heart raced, and she closed her eyes for a brief second. But before their lips could meet, the landline phone rang loudly. She pulled back. Hello? On the other end, silence. Only someone breathing. Listening. The next morning, a white pickup truck was parked a few meters from the farm's gate. No one inside. Clara stared through the window, uneasy. Luke noticed it too. Are you sure you want me here? Clara answered without hesitation. I'd rather face the world with you here than go back to living in that empty house. He stepped closer, heart pounding. You scare me, Clara, because you're the first thing I've felt since I woke up. She looked at him, eyes glistening. And you scare me, Luke, because you're the first thing I've wanted to feel in years. That night, she didn't let him sleep on the couch. She laid out an extra mattress on the floor of the guest room and said, You need proper rest. He looked at her before lying down. You saved me in that river. And now, you're saving parts of me I didn't even know existed. She swallowed hard. Just promise me one thing, anything. Don't give up on remembering, but also don't give up on me. And in that silent exchange, in the middle of the dark, their souls began to stitch together, piece by piece, like a love born from forgetting. The sheriff's black pickup appeared at the end of the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust that seemed to signal trouble. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and walked firmly to the gate, heart pounding. Stepping out of the vehicle, Sheriff Thompson adjusted his hat, accompanied by a tall man in a beige suit, cold gaze, and forced smile. Charles Whitmore, he said, extending his hand. You know me, local businessman. Clara didn't shake it. What are you doing here? The sheriff cleared his throat. We've received reports about a strange man staying on this farm. He's a threat to the community. Clara crossed her arms. He's injured, has no memory. I'm just helping." Charles took a theatrical step forward. "And what if he's a criminal, Mrs. Jenkins? Have you thought about the danger you're in?" Luke appeared at the door, shirt open, a bandage on his chest, his eyes locked on the two men, tense. Sheriff noticed the medallion around his neck. "What's your name, son?" "I don't know," he replied firmly. Charles smirked. "Convenient," Clara cut in. "He's not going anywhere." The air grew heavy. The sheriff simply muttered, "We're watching." The next morning, Clara found an envelope stapled to the gate. Inside, a cheap printed flyer. "Wanted, armed robbery. Dangerous." The black and white photo was blurry, but resembled Luke. On the back, a handwritten note. "Keep hiding him, and you'll pay the price." Clara's blood ran cold. Luke took the flyer, read it, and walked off without a word, disappearing into the barn. When she followed him, she found him punching a grain sack in anger. "Maybe that's really who I am," he said. "Maybe they're right." "Don't say that," Clara replied, grabbing his bruised hands. "You've had so many chances to hurt me, and you haven't. Do you know what that means? That maybe I'm pretending without knowing it?" He shot back, voice trembling. She embraced him. "Or maybe you're trying to remember who you were before fear took over." Luke pressed his face to her neck, vulnerable. For the first time, he cried. Outside, the rumors spread like wildfire, and Clara knew the storm was only beginning. At the town market, Clara noticed people avoiding her. Clerks exchanged looks. Customers whispered. The cashier didn't even make eye contact while ringing. Her items. The widow's harboring a criminal. An old lady murmured in the back. At home, Clara slammed the grocery bags on the table. "They want to break us with fear," she told Luke. He looked at her with admiration. "You don't even know me, but you're fighting for me like it's your own life," she replied with a restrained smile. "Maybe you already are part of it." That night, Clara sat in the living room armchair, going through an old box of her late husband's photos. She searched for clues, anything to help her understand what was happening. Luke joined her, sat beside her, and picked up a photo of her husband with other men from town. "Who's this?" he asked, pointing at a younger Charles. "Charles Whitmore, the man who now wants you gone." Luke fell silent. "That face makes me sick." She looked at him, surprised. "A memory? A feeling?" "Like I've taken a beating from him before." Clara swallowed hard. Something was off. Days later, hearing an engine, Clara peeked through the window. A new truck was parked nearby. Inside, two men were watching the house through binoculars. Luke went outside with a shovel in hand, but she stopped him. "If you act, they win." Later, she found fresh footprints near the shed. She locked all doors, turned on the floodlights. "They're trying to scare us. Maybe take you away from me." Luke gently pulled her by the waist. "And what if I really am dangerous, Clara?" She looked into his eyes. "Then hurt me now, but with love." And she kissed him for the first time. A kiss held back, intense, tasting of urgency. That night, they slept in each other's arms for the first time. Clara, lying against his chest, listened to Luke's heartbeat like it was the ticking of destiny. "Why do you trust me so much?" he asked in the dark. "Because I was already broken. And you, even without memories, are piecing me back together," she whispered. He held her tighter. "If I remember and don't like who I was, promise you'll still want me around?" She caressed his scar. "I promise, because the man you're becoming is what matters now." But at dawn, the sheriff's call would mark the beginning of war. "You have 48 hours to hand over the man you're harboring," he said over the phone, dryly. "Or we'll come get him ourselves." Clara hung up without replying. She looked at Luke, sipping coffee on the porch, and her heart clenched. "They're coming," she said, "and they won't ask nicely." Luke stood up, facing the horizon. "Then maybe it's time I find out who I really am." And with that, fear stopped being a shadow and became a calling. The battle for the past was about to begin. It was the middle of the night when Luke woke up, panting and drenched in sweat. He had dreamed of a brown-haired woman screaming his name amidst flames, and a red pickup truck spinning off a cliff. Clara appeared in the doorway with a tight chest. "Another nightmare?" He nodded, trembling. "She called me Luke." I heard it clearly. Clara sat beside him, touching his face. "Maybe your past is trying to find you." Luke gripped her hand tightly. "Or maybe it's trying to warn me." At breakfast, while flipping through an old magazine Clara kept on the shelf, Luke froze. On a page, it was a 1982 article titled, "Land Dispute at Harris Ranch." The photo showed a burned property and the name Luke Harris in the caption. Time stopped. "That's it. I've been there before." Clara came closer, surprised. "Are you sure?" He pointed at the red pickup truck in the background of the photo. "That's it, the one from my dream." The tension in the air became almost tangible. If this is real, someone tried to erase you. That same afternoon, Clara and Luke took her blue pickup and followed a dirt road south to the hills. After 30 minutes driving, they reached the ruins of the old Harris Ranch. The fences were broken, the main house in ruins, with fresh graffiti on the walls. But something about that place made Luke's heart pound. He entered the collapsed structure as if guided by something invisible. Stepping on a loose board, he heard a familiar creak. "I know every sound here," he said, eyes filled with tears. In the back of the house, they found an abandoned stable with an old sign lying on the ground. Clara flipped it over and read, "Harris family since 1913. Luke fell to his knees. "They erased everything, but I lived here. I feel it in my skin." She knelt beside him, gripping his hand. "We're going to prove who you are." Inside an old wardrobe, they found a rusted metal box with letters, bills, and a birth certificate. Luke Harris, born in 1980. Clara read aloud. "You're 25 years old?" Luke murmured, "And someone wanted to make sure I didn't know that." On the drive back, Clara stayed quiet while Luke stared out the window, trying to process it all. "What if I'm the last living Harris?" he asked. "Then you have an inheritance to claim," she replied. But his eyes were dark, and enemies still nearby. When they arrived home, Clara saw fresh tire tracks at the entrance. Someone had been there while they were gone. Luke grabbed a wrench and checked the rooms. Nothing stolen. But on the table, a note spelled out in cut-out newspaper letters. "Stop digging into the past." The message was clear. Someone was watching their every move. Clara locked all the doors, installed extra latches, and even bought an old radio communicator to stay in contact with Luke if they ever got separated. The tension in the house grew, but so did something else. A silent longing, an intimacy built between fear and hope. On a rainy night, unable to sleep, Clara went downstairs and found Luke in the kitchen, drinking coffee. He looked at her. "If this all ends badly, I want you to know that being here with you is what keeps me standing." Clara approached. Slowly, "You don't need to say anything, just stay." And this time, the kiss was real. A deep, intense kiss, like two broken pasts finding shelter in each other. When they pulled away, Clara rested her forehead on his and whispered, "You are more than what they made you forget." Luke cupped her face gently. "Then help me remember everything." The air was electric, but outside, headlights turned on. A black pickup truck watched them from the road, and before they could react, it vanished into the darkness. The next day, Luke decided to go to the city hall with Clara. There, they found documents showing that Harris Ranch had been transferred in 1984 to a company called Whitmore Investments. That was right after the fire, Clara said, flipping through the records. You lost everything, and Charles Whitmore gained. Luke clenched his fists. He knew who I was, all along. The clerk glanced around nervously. Don't talk about this here. Mr. Whitmore has eyes everywhere. And in that silence, one thing became clear. They had uncovered something many wanted buried. Outside City Hall, Luke paused beside Clara's truck and looked at the town with new eyes. They stole my land, tried to erase me, and now they want to silence us again. Clara took his hand. But you're not alone anymore. Luke nodded, resolute. If they want war, they'll get it. And for the first time since she found him by the river, Clara saw not just pain or confusion in his eyes, but purpose. Something inside him had awakened. And what would come next might change the entire town. The silence inside the pickup truck was cutting as Clara gripped the documents she had secretly obtained from the county office. The pages trembled in her hands, not just from nerves, but from the weight of the truth they carried. The land was transferred to a shell company, Luke, and the name listed as responsible is Charles Whitmore. Luke stared out the window at the gravel road, as if expecting his past to materialize there. So he stole everything and made it look like I never existed. Clara pulled over, turning to him with teary eyes. Or made it look like you were the one to blame. That night, Clara barely slept. Every step Luke took in the house, she heard. It was like the weight of the world had returned to his shoulders, only now with more clarity. The next morning, an unmarked envelope appeared under the door. Inside was a copy of a search warrant issued in Luke Harris's name, accusing him of armed robbery, resisting arrest, and attempted murder. This is a setup, Clara said, trembling as she read the paper. They want you to run, Luke, to disappear. Again, but this time with a new crime on your back. He exhaled deeply, or force me to stay silent. In the kitchen, Clara's old RCA radio from the 80s crackled before a choppy broadcast came through. Attention residents of Bozeman. A dangerous man may be among us. Dark hair, light eyes, about 25 years old. The sheriff's voice echoed through the walls, each word a stab to the gut. Luke turned off the radio with a violent twist. They're setting the stage, and they're going to use the whole town against me. Clara crossed her arms. Then we need to act before they succeed. They decided to dig deeper. They returned to the records office in the dead of night with a flashlight and a plan. While Clara kept the night guard distracted outside, Luke searched the dusty basement for old case files. That's when he found his father's name, Jonathan Harris, tied to archived lawsuits, all of them trying to block the sale of their land to Whitmore Investments. He fought and vanished. Luke stared at the records, covered in dirt and time. I'm not the first one they tried to erase. Clara rushed in. We need to go. The guard got a call. Someone knows we're here. Back at the farm, they noticed the gate was open. The locks had been forced. They've been inside, Luke muttered, gripping a flashlight and a wrench. On the living room table, a single bullet had been left, wrapped in a scrap of newspaper with a message scrawled in red ink. Go back to sleep, Luke. Clara's eyes widened. They're not just threatening us. They're watching us, inside our home. Fear gave way to rage. Luke looked at the makeshift weapon in his hand. If they think this is going to stop me, then they still don't know who I am. The next day, Clara went out alone to refuel the truck and buy supplies. As she entered the local store, every stare cut like a blade. Whispering filled the aisles. That's her, protecting the fugitive. At the register, the clerk refused. to serve her. We don't sell to accomplices. When she got back to the parking lot, one of the tires was slashed. She had to call Luke from a payphone. "They're applying pressure. They want to cut me off from you." His voice was steady. Then now it's personal. When she got home, Clara cried. Not from fear, but from rage. They picked the wrong woman. That very night, sitting on the porch under a rusted yellow bulb, Clara and Luke had their most honest conversation. He looked deep into her eyes. "You could have left me by that river. You could have turned me in. But you stayed." She gave him a sad smile. "Because I saw pain in your eyes. The same pain I carried after I lost my husband." Luke then took her hands, his own eyes shining. "You're the only thread of reality I've got. If everything falls apart, I just want to remember your touch." And she kissed him. Deeply, a kiss that seals fate and defies any sentence. Days later, they noticed they were being followed. A black pickup kept parking 2 blocks away, at corners and nearby fields. Luke decided to act. He took an old Polaroid camera and began secretly photographing the license plate, the driver, the times it appeared. That's how they discovered the truck belonged to Charles Whitmore's private security firm. Clara clenched her fists. "So, he wants you alive, but under control," Luke answered firmly. "Or dead, but silent. What he doesn't know is that I'm going to speak." The next morning, Clara found an old diary among her late husband's belongings, dusty and buried at the bottom of a basement trunk. Inside, she read a chilling entry. "Charles is in it deep. He killed the boy's father." When Luke read it, the ground vanished beneath him. "My father was murdered." It was the missing piece. Now they knew what had been done and why, but they also knew, with every truth uncovered, the noose tightened. And someone out there, maybe the whole town, wouldn't let that truth escape easily. And that's exactly what they intended to do. The morning began with a freezing breeze cutting silently across the fields, as if nature itself could sense the danger approaching. Clara was making coffee when she heard a muffled thud from the basement. She rushed down and found Luke kneeling beside a cracked wooden box, holding a worn leather-bound journal in his hands. "It was hidden under the floorboards," he murmured, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. The handwriting belonged to Clara's late husband, and the contents were damning. Charles Whitmore had bribed local politicians, judges, and police officers. Dates, amounts, names. It was all there. And one chilling final note. Jonathan Harris knew too much. Clara leaned against the wall, as if needing support to hold the weight of the truth. "My husband, he was killed because of this, wasn't he?" Luke nodded silently, but his eyes said everything. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, not to escape the pain, but to turn it into fuel. "If this town saw me as a fragile widow until now, it's time they met the woman who rose after the storm." Luke squeezed her hand. "And I'll be by your side till the end." The sound of an approaching engine made them run to the window. The black pickup again thought there was no other choice. They had to leave before the next knock came with handcuffs. They grabbed what they could: the journal, some clothes, Clara's late husband's old revolver, a yellowed map with mountain trails, and a flashlight. Luke filled the tank of their silver 1985 Silverado. Wow. Clara locked up the house and left a note under the mat. "The truth will scream, even if they try to bury it." They set off down the dirt road, the sun beginning to dip behind the mountains. The radio crackled softly, playing an old country tune. Neither of them spoke, but that silence held more promises than any vow ever could. The trail through the mountains was narrow and winding, bordered by cliffs and dry trees. The truck barely squeezed between the rocks. Luke drove with sharp, Focus, eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Do you think they're coming after us? Clara nodded. Not yet. But once they realize we're gone, they will. On a flatter stretch, they stopped to rest and eat. Under the starry sky, Luke looked at Clara and whispered, I don't know who I was before, but I know who I am with you. She leaned in, touching her forehead to his. You're the man who made me feel again. And there, in the middle of nowhere, they kissed with the urgency of those who may not see tomorrow. While Clara slept in the truck, Luke flipped through the journal again. One entry caught his attention. A note about tape storage in the old Harris farm shed. It was a clue. There might be visual proof of Whitmore's crimes. He woke Clara, and together they changed their plans. Instead of running far, they'd go back to where it all began. If this town wants to erase our history, then we'll force it to remember every detail. The plan was bolder now. More dangerous, but also more necessary. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. They arrived at the Harris Ranch in the dead of night. The place was a skeleton of the past. Broken fences, a collapsed barn, the house overtaken by weeds and cobwebs. But something lingered in the air, an invisible force, as if every wall wanted to confess what it had seen and what had been silenced. Luke headed to the shed and began searching in the back. Under a tarp, he found a metal box. Inside, dozens of VHS tapes, labeled with dates from the 70s and 80s. Clara knelt beside him. If this is what I think it is, we can destroy Whitmore. But they knew. With this kind of proof in hand, they had just become the biggest target. Wasting no time, they drove to the home of one of Clara's old friends, Hank, a retired radio technician with a working VHS player. When Hank saw the tapes and heard the story, his face went pale. You two are playing with fire, but he loaded the tape anyway. The shaky footage revealed a meeting in a dark room. And there he was, a young Charles Whitmore, smoking a cigar, negotiating illegal land deals and admitting he had taken care of old Harris. Hank made a copy of the tape. This needs to go to a judge, now. As they headed back to the road, they saw headlights in the distance. They weren't alone. Clara looked at Luke. If they catch us now, everything disappears. Luke stepped on the gas. The chase was about to begin. And this time, the prize wasn't just freedom, it was justice. As the engine roared through the winding dirt roads, Clara shouted, Go, Luke. Show this town who you really are. And he answered, with fire in his eyes, I'm not stopping. Not even if this is my last day. And with that, the night opened up into a new battle. A race against time. Part 7. The plan seemed simple. Deliver the journal and the tapes to a respected journalist in the neighboring town, someone Clara had known since college. But in a world where truth is worth more than money, not every friendship can survive the weight of blackmail. The moment Luke and Clara stepped into the modest newsroom of the local radio station, they sensed something was off. The overwhelming silence, the journalist's nervous eyes, the back door left ajar. When the recorder was turned off and his smile faded, it was already too late. Armed officers stormed in, and Clara was handcuffed on charges of obstructing justice and harboring a fugitive. Luke tried to resist, but 4 men surrounded him. He was dragged outside with no chance to fight back. The blows came quickly, deliberately. A kick to the stomach, a punch to the face, a pipe slammed into his back. The world spun around Luke. Blood ran down the side of his face, and his consciousness flickered between pain and darkness. They dumped him on a dirt road like unwanted trash and drove off without looking back. Night fell, and the cold began to overtake his body. But it was there, between life and death, that he heard a soft voice, familiar from somewhere in the past. Luke Harris? Daisy Walker, a woman with steady brown eyes and hands, roughened by farm work, pulled up in an old truck beside his collapsed body. A former worker on the Harris Ranch, she recognized Luke by the locket, the scar, and what she called his father's eyes when he was her own. She took him to her hidden cabin in the hills and cared for his wounds for 2 days. When he woke, Luke could barely speak. But when he finally could, his first question was, "Clara ... is she safe?" Daisy answered bluntly, "She's in jail, and they'll silence her. Unless you stop them." His face still bruised and battered. Luke rose slowly. "I have to go back. I have to get her out." Daisy hesitated. "They'll kill you, Luke, just like they killed your father." He grabbed his backpack, where he had hidden a copy of the VHS tape and the crumpled journal. "Maybe that's what they're afraid of? Someone finishing what my father started." Daisy handed him an old pickup truck, a rusty Winchester, and a portable radio. "Take these. But remember, this town is a deep well. If you jump in without a rope, you won't climb out." Luke nodded. He had already jumped. Now he was going all the way down. He reached the town just before dawn. The streets were empty, except for a lone cop dozing in a patrol car. Luke parked behind the courthouse and slipped in through the side door, helped by Daisy, who knew how to bypass the old alarm systems. Inside the building, he found Judge Daniels, once his father's law professor. He showed him the journal and the tape. Daniels, stunned, recognized the voices on the recording. "If this goes public, it will bring down Whitmore's empire. But it'll also put you and Clara in the crosshairs." Luke's gaze was steady. "We're already there." Meanwhile, Clara waited in the cold jail cell. Her eyes weren't red from crying, but from burning fury. When she heard footsteps in the corridor, she braced for the worst. But it was Luke who appeared at the door, 2 guards behind him. The judge issued the order, "You're free." She rushed to him and, despite the bruises still marking his face, kissed him with fierce relief, silent tears falling. "I thought I'd lost you." Luke gently cupped her face in both hands. "You're my truth, Clara, and I'll protect that with everything I've got." They walked out of the station under the first rays of sunlight. The town was just beginning to stir, but this time, the news wouldn't be filtered by Whitmore. Daisy had already sent copies of the tape to 2 radio stations and a TV channel. By noon, the whole region would know the truth. But one last obstacle remained. Charles Whitmore wouldn't go down quietly. He was preparing a response. And like a cornered animal, he'd be dangerous. Luke and Clara knew the real showdown was still to come. But now they were together, and there was no silence strong enough to tear them apart. The courthouse clock read exactly 10:47 a.m. when Luke pushed open the heavy wooden doors, interrupting a hearing already in progress. Heads turned all at once, stunned, some even shocked to see the man who was believed to be missing. Or possibly dead. With steady steps and a face still bruised from the beatings, he walked straight to Judge Daniels and raised the journal as if holding something sacred. "I brought the truth, and it comes with names, dates, and voices this town tried to erase." A heavy silence swept through the room, broken only by the sound of a VHS tape sliding into an old player. The shaky image flickered onto the courtroom screen, showing a man confessing the crimes Charles Whitmore committed to steal the Harris land. Clara, seated at the defendant's bench, covered her mouth as the scene unfolded. Her eyes filled with tears, not of pain, but of relief. Someone finally believed them. The judge stood, called for order, and declared Clara's immediate release. As the courtroom officers removed her cuffs, she rushed into Luke's arms, holding him tightly. "You really came back," she whispered. Luke, eyes wet with emotion, replied, "I'll never let you face this alone again." But before they could even catch a breath, the judge issued a challenge. This evidence is strong, but we still need physical documents tying Whitmore directly to the registry fraud. We need the safe your father mentioned in the old records. Without hesitation, Luke grabbed Clara's hand. It's buried at the house where everything began. They climbed into Daisy's old pickup and hit the road toward the abandoned Harris property. The house stood in ruins, surrounded by tall weeds and broken windows. The wind rattled the loose shingles, whispering like the voices of the dead. Luke walked to the old tree in the yard, the one his father used to sit under. He always said he'd never bury secrets at home, but this is the one place he felt safe. With a rusty shovel, he began to dig while Clara lit the ground with the truck's headlights. After half an hour, the shovel hit something hard. A heavy, old safe marked with the family crest on its side. Luke hauled it out and with trembling hands turned the combination lock. Miraculously, it clicked open. Inside were sealed envelopes, the original land deeds for the Harris Ranch. Photos of secret meetings between Whitmore and local politicians, and bank statements showing suspicious transfers. But what made their breath catch was a single cassette tape labeled Confession, 1979. Clara held the tape as if it were on fire. That's his voice, the accomplice. They returned to the truck, connected the tape to an old recorder, and listened in silence. The voice of a nervous man confessed to land theft, courthouse bribes, and even the order to kill anyone who got in the way, including Luke's father. The tape ended with a muffled sound, a gunshot perhaps, or something worse. Clara turned off the recorder, her hands trembling. This changes everything. This is his end. With the safe in the back and the tape in hand, they drove back to town. But now, they were no longer fugitives or suspects. They were bearers of a truth about to turn the entire city upside down. As they passed through the streets, faces appeared in windows, whispers spread, and the name Harris was spoken again with reverence and fear. Luke pulled the truck up in front of the courthouse and turned to Clara. After this, there's no turning back. Everything's going to explode. She touched his face and said firmly, "Then let it explode, but let it explode with the truth." They entered the courthouse again, this time not as victims, but as avengers. The judge was waiting. When the safe was placed on the bench, eyes widened all around. As the contents were revealed, signatures, contracts, bank records, there was no more denying it. Charles Whitmore wasn't just a businessman. He was a thief of legacies, a criminal whose decades of power were built on lies. And now, with every document exposed, every recorded voice played, his empire began to crumble. But what Luke didn't know was that Whitmore still had one last card up his sleeve. The courthouse was packed. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of the tension hanging in the air. Men in worn hats and women with scarves tied over their hair filled every corner of the chamber, as if waiting for the biggest show in Bozeman's history. The entire town fell silent when Luke Harris, now with his name reclaimed, entered with steady steps, Clara by his side. Judge Daniels, his expression solemn, opened the special hearing that would decide the fate of Charles Whitmore and decades of injustice buried by money and influence. The safe was placed in full view, an irrefutable symbol of the truth, and the silence was broken only by the judge's trembling voice. Today, Bozeman must decide whether it stays on its knees or learns to walk with its head held high again. Charles sat beside his attorneys, trying to maintain a proud posture, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed his panic. When the cassette tape played and the accomplices' voices filled the courtroom, confessing every scheme, the murmurs turned to open outrage. Familiar names of the local elite were mentioned, including Sheriff McCullen, who went pale as his own voice admitted to covering up crimes. The judge halted the hearing and ordered McCullen to be cuffed immediately. The crowd erupted in restrained applause, each click of the handcuffs feeling like a long overdue step toward Justice. Luke was called to the stand. With steady hands and eyes locked on Whitmore, he spoke about the night he woke up by the river, the nightmares, the memory loss, and how Clara gave him not just shelter, but dignity. There was no hatred in his voice, only pain, hope, and redemption. I didn't know who I was, but that woman believed in me when no one else would. Now I know I'm Luke Harris, son of a man who had everything stolen from him, and I swear I will honor every inch of that land. Clara's eyes filled with tears, and so did many in the gallery. With the safe's documents and the tape's content, there were no more doubts. The judge slammed the gavel down with force, officially returning the Harris land to Luke, clearing all charges against Clara, and launching an immediate investigation into every name involved. Charles tried to stand, outraged, but was held down by officers. "You don't know who you're messing with," he shouted, but no one was afraid of him anymore. The town had awakened, and now saw Luke and Clara as symbols of resistance against corruption and power abuse. At the end of the session, just as people were starting to leave, Luke slowly turned to Clara. His breathing heavy, heart racing, he knelt before her, right there in front of the emotional crowd. Clara gasped, covering her mouth as he gripped her hands tightly. "You were my home when I was just a lost name in the wind. You were my truth when the world felt like a lie. If you'll have me, I want to build something new with you. A story without secrets, without running." Silence fell again, but this time it was enchanted, as if time itself paused to hear her answer. Clara didn't hesitate. With tears in her eyes, she knelt with him, sealing the vow with a kiss that made the whole town forget, if only for a moment, the wounds they carried. It was a slow kiss, heavy with pain, resilience, and deep love. A kiss between two survivors who chose each other in the heart of the storm. The crowd erupted into applause, some crying openly. It felt like the weight of generations was finally being buried with dignity, and in its place, something new was born. Something pure. As they left the courthouse hand in hand, Clara whispered, "I never thought I'd say this, but you changed everything." Luke squeezed her fingers and replied, "You reminded me that even the deepest scars can become maps that lead us home." Behind them, the town watched with awe and hope. But just as they began to walk toward peace, Luke stopped, gazing at the horizon, and murmured, "There's still a shadow, something left unsaid." Clara looked at him, confused, and he added, "That medallion." It wasn't the only one. The sky over Bozeman burned in shades of orange and gold as the first beams of the new Harris Ranch began to rise. Echoes of the trial still lingered in town, but now, instead of fear, something rare was spreading hope. Clara and Luke, now married, walked hand in hand through the ruins of the past, rebuilding every corner of that land with their own hands. The old house was restored, the porch filled with flowers, and the once empty barn began to echo with young voices, shy laughter, and broken dreams rescued from country roads. Clara used to say that every brick they laid was a wound healed. Luke would just smile and squeeze her hand. The shelter for youth was born from pain, transformed into purpose. Boys and girls who had lost everything now found food, warm beds, and above all, someone to listen and care. Clara welcomed them with hot coffee and blankets, while Luke taught them how to fix pickup truck engines or plant in the fields. He used to say the land only blooms if you care for the roots. And that's exactly what they did. They watered stories, healed silences, and rewrote futures. The walls were covered with drawings, thank you letters, and one old framed photo. Luke as a child in front of the ranch, now finally back home. But not everything had been told. One quiet afternoon, while digging a spot to plant a new lemon tree behind the house, Luke felt his shovel strike something solid. He knelt down, brushed the dirt away, and uncovered a small rusted box. Inside, he found a medallion, nearly identical to the one he wore when Clara first found him, but this one had different initials, MH. He opened it and found a photo of a child, along with a letter dated 1974. It was written by his mother, speaking of a second child, a brother who had been taken away as a baby. Luke collapsed to his knees, heart pounding, hands trembling. He rushed to Clara, who was brewing tea in the kitchen, and showed her the medallion and the letter. For a moment, everything went still. Then Clara read the letter, word by word, and looked up at him. "Luke, you're not alone in this story. It goes deeper than we thought." Luke rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "They took everything from me, but they couldn't erase where I came from." That night, they sat on the porch, staring at the lights of the shelter in the distance, and understood that their story had become more than love. It had become legacy, not at dawn. Luke took the medallion to the sheriff's office. A new sheriff was in charge now, and the town had begun cleaning away its old shadows. The search for the lost brother was officially opened. Clara, always by Luke's side, managed the shelter, the bills, the youth, but also the silences that came when Luke drifted into deep thought. She knew the wound of loss still pulsed within him. But now, there was also the relief of searching, and that, in itself, was freedom. On that land, once soaked in unspoken screams, voices now blossomed. Months later, at the official reopening of the ranch, Clara gave a speech that brought many to tears. She shared how she found Luke by the river, nameless and lost, and how he had returned her courage to love again. At the end, she called Luke onto the makeshift stage, and in front of everyone, held his hand and said, "You found me when you didn't even know who you were. And now together, we help others find themselves too." The audience rose in applause. Luke pulled her close and kissed her tenderly, a kiss full of promise, of roots now planted in the right soil. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind, the hills and the sounds of young voices echoed in the distance, Luke and Clara walked to the old oak tree where it all began. They sat together under its shade. Luke held both medallions in his hands. Clara rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Maybe this second medallion is just the beginning of another part of your story." He replied, "And maybe now, I won't have to dig up the past alone anymore." She smiled. "Whatever comes, we face it together." With those words, the imaginary camera would pull back, slowly rising to reveal the ranch bathed in warm evening light, surrounded by green fields, laughter echoing in the distance, and a sky glowing red with sunset. A new era had begun in Bozeman. And while the world kept spinning beyond its borders, right there, on that piece of land once scarred by pain and now healed by love, two souls had finally found their home. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the weight of injustice, the power of true love, and the spark of hope being reignited even in the midst of despair, then this channel is your place. Here, you'll always find stories like Clara and Luke's emotional tales of courage, resilience, romance, and redemption. So if you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single story that will warm your heart and make you fall in love again with life, with love, and with justice. Now tell me in the comments, would you trust someone with no memory if they showed up at your door, like Luke did at Clara's? What city or country are you watching this from? I'd love to know how far this message of hope is reaching. Which scene moved you the most? The kiss on the porch? The final trial? The unexpected proposal? Share this video with someone who loves good stories and needs to remember that true love still exists. And if you think this story deserves to become a movie, comment down below. This story belongs on the big screen. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, no matter how dark the night may seem, love always finds a way to rise with the morning light. Until next time.